Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. After a brief hiatus of 1 week, Abhijit Iyer is back with us. Let's welcome Abhijit Iyer and jump straight into questions. Abhijit, namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel.
Well, and thanks for having me on.
The pleasure is all ours, Abhijit, and we have a fairly big backlog of questions. Let's jump straight into questions now. Sudip Bhaumik wants to know, what is your opinion about Balasaheb Thackrey?
Very good opinion. I think he was the one person who understood the nature of Indian politics. I think he understood the nature of what street negotiation means. You tell me one other person who came up entirely on his own and created a movement that was politically viable within his own lifetime, right? Very few people. And remember, sure, I mean, there's a little bit of hypocrisy in everybody. He didn't like, people like Kala Madrasis in Bombay, but he was the only person who tangibly helped Kashmiri Pandits when they got kicked out. Okay, so if no man is 100% a hero, but overall, I think when we look back, I generally have an extremely positive opinion about Balasaheb Thackrey.
Next question, please. Mr. Lee wants to know, could you make a very quick SWOT analysis on Russia, India, China cooperation or the Primakov doctrine, especially in the current geopolitical situation?
So if you look at when Primakov was the Prime Minister of Russia, when he developed that doctrine, and prior to that foreign minister, but a very powerful foreign minister, his whole thing was he saw that Russia was going to get weaker and weaker and China was going to get stronger and stronger. At that point of time, China still wasn't the kind of, peer competitor power, but everybody knew that ultimately it was going to become, sir, lots of background noise, sir. Can you? That it was going to become a peer competitor power. And he realized that, Russia's power differential with China was going to come down. And so he wanted India in that block, that by itself, Russia could not balance off China, but Russia and India together within that three-power equation could balance off China. And technically, it was a very smart doctrine. I don't know why we didn't go for it more and more and more. Sometimes I think we tend to look at international relations almost as a binary. Ya to is block mein hona hai, ya to us block mein hona hai, instead of having very good relationships with everybody. So, well, it was a good doctrine. What would have been the benefits of it? Well, the first benefit that you would have had was a much more increased pressure and less threat to China on resolving the border dispute. Probably much more favorably, because we're never really realistically going to be able to resolve that border dispute militarily, right? So that was the strength of the deal. The weakness of the deal was assuming that India is a risk taker. India has always been an extremely low risk country. The opportunities I explained to you, and that was pretty much all there was to it. The threats really arose if you weren't able to pull it off. If you weren't able to pull off what I call atomic balancing, which is a realistic problem because our foreign service isn't the best trained foreign service. They can't pull off complicated maneuvers. They're too disjointed and full of personal agendas to ever do anything properly. So therein lies the problem.
And Jay is wanting to know, sir, is writing and Hadith of Quran the way life is, which is mentioned in Quran, is exactly the reflection of life, which used to be prevalent in the pastoral Arabia in 6 AD or 600 AD, I think.
No, it actually isn't. First of all, they went pastoralists. They were no, remember, when you're talking about the Quran, you're actually talking about a sedentary civilization. Okay, There are two paths to Saudi Arabia, to modern Saudi Arabia, actually to the Arab Peninsula. One is the Hejaz, and the other is the desert. The Hejaz, which is the southern coast, the Red Sea coast, was considered an extremely civilized place. Remember, the Queen of Sheba is meant to have come from there. There's a lot of ancient antiquities. The Nabateans who built Petra, for example, had a lot of stuff out there. The problem is we tend to equate, we extrapolate what we see of modern day Arabia, which is a northern, the area around Riyadh, the desert, which was considered uncivilized by the southern Arabs, by the Hejazis, even at that point of time. Okay, so Quran reflects a very sophisticated civilization at that point of time, but a very disjointed civilization. Think of them as essentially warring states, like Greece in 4 to 600 BC, minus a lot of the philosophy and things like that, heavily influenced by external philosophies and so on and so forth. But the Hadith actually comes about after the creation of the Arab Empire. So it's actually, the Hadiths are much more a product of intermingling with the Persians and the Byzantines and things like that. Right? Even the Quran, there is a lot of literature to show you is it wasn't closed canon by the time the Prophet died. Apparently, there are a lot of additions that have come after that. Right? So again, it's not exactly a replica. It's been quite mangled and adapted along, especially with the Hadiths, much more so, to suit a sort of expansionist imperial worldview. Next.
Mandar Karnik wants to know what doctrine, if any, guides Indian long-term strategic planning.
Ancient Indian invention, zero. Have you heard about it? We discovered it in 732 AD and then we decided to collectively reduce ourselves to that. That is the guiding principle of Indian strategic planning. Zero. Shunya. Shunyata. I think it was Rahul Gandhi, the great philosopher of modern India, who mentioned it in his speech. I think it was an interaction with some university with Ashutosh Vashni.
Nuclear weapons make it difficult to occupy large areas of land. In this case, should India focus on making Air Force its main military force and reducing the strength of the army? Chai wants to know.
Kind of, yes. I'll tell you what happens. See, the army is a physical threat because you're actually taking away something from someone. And Air Force is less of a threat because you're destroying a lot more than an army is, but you're not taking it away from them. An army outside Delhi means collapse, but an Air Force bombing Delhi does not necessarily mean collapse, right? Which is why a lot of us have been, calling for an air-centric vision of India's defense policy where you prioritize the Air Force rather than the army, because it's a much, much more flexible tool of strategy. See, the problem, of course, with our politicians is they're still in an age where, the air forces were extremely blunt instruments. They think of the firebombing of Tokyo, the bombing of Dresden, as opposed to the extremely precise tool it's become since then. So therein lies the problem. But yes, I agree with you. We should be focusing on the Air Force.
Neeraj Kulkarni wants to know, what is your opinion on Turkey's quick turnaround from China camp to USA camp amidst the Ukraine-Russia war?
Look, Turkey is one of those countries that keeps hurting itself. It now has a reputation for perfidy and nobody is willing to take it seriously anymore. Okay, so even if you look at the kind of, use and dump policy they had in northern Syria, they started off when Ahmed Davutoglu was the foreign minister. He wanted a zero friction policy. Today, you won't find one global leader who has anything good to say about them, about the Turks. So it's essentially seen as perfidy, as a perfidious country not to be tested. It's at best a temporary ally. And specifically amidst the Ukraine-Russia war, the Russians were like, well, Turkey, what else do you expect? That was literally the reaction I got from Moscow. But that was also the reaction I keep getting from the Americans and the Europeans. So it's, Turkey in a sense has kind of destroyed its own reputation.
Kapil Gund wants to know, what are the problems in F-35 program? Is it a failure?
No, boss. It's a spectacular success. Even when people like there's a very famous website called Australian Air Power, and I mean, I love them. They're very respectable people, but they had a very old school focus on technology and how air warfare should happen. The F-35 has proven almost everybody wrong. It's a fantastic plane. I think the only limiting factor you have is the amount of weapons that can be carried inside, which is going to be rectified shortly. But otherwise, it's a brilliant plane. It's not a failure at all. In fact, the costs that are now coming out are truly, I mean, when America puts its mind to something, it brings down the cost of things, ridiculously so. So the F-35 has really succeeded. The point is, if you were already a sort of NATO networked, even if you're not NATO networked, so for example, Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Israel, Japan, Korea, Australia, if you're one of those countries, the kind of networking you have to do with this new aircraft is minimal, the amount of money you have to spend. But for that plane to come to India and for us to prepare all our other systems to work with it seamlessly, it's prohibitively expensive. Right, so it's the integration cost that's prohibitively expensive. But otherwise, it's a fantastic plane. It's going to run rings around any other fighter that we know of, even before the other fighter gets to see the F-35.
Ishan Sharma wants to know, after seeing the recent controversies, what do you think will happen in the future to parties like AAP, TMC, SS, Shiv Sena? Will BJP be benefited by all of this?
Look, I think you should wait for about 10 to 15 years of churn, after which one significant opposition party will emerge. It's not going to be the Shiv Sena, because I think the Shiv Sena has kind of destroyed a lot of its base by aligning with the NCP and Congress. But AAP and TMC are the ones to watch out for. I'm betting on AAP because they're the first party to, break the one state curse. They're also the first party to break the one language curse. Whereas TMC has still not been able to break the language curse. They're still a Bengali party. At most, they can have an impact in Tripura, which is also Bengali speaking. And other than that, nothing else. So it's very, but still allow about 10 to 15 years of flux. I'm betting on the AAP, though it could also go the TMC's way, which is kind of at the root of what Abhishek Banerjee wants to do. He wants to take it out of just being Bengali. And Mamta is, boss, I am not giving up the one bird in hand for two in the bush. Let's see. My bet is AAP. I think AAP will emerge as the main opposition at one point of time.
Keep that question, please. I have an observation here, Abhijit. If you look at the recent Goa results, both TMC and AAP have managed each, but they have taken different routes to get there. AAP has openly, aligned itself with one community in Goa, which they felt was enough for them to fetch the votes. I don't think TMC has done that. Your point, please?
Yes, they are opportunists. Okay. I think the issue has always been Goa is a very difficult place to gauge. Because remember, Goa and Uttarakhand are highly fraught when you want to predict or analyze, because the victory margins, they're like 1,500, 2,000, things like that. With AAP, what you will see is they generally always, wherever they go, they tend to focus on one community as the main base. They consolidate and then they build on top of that. TMC is becoming very difficult to identify for anybody. I mean, what becomes its USP in Goa, for example? Nothing. I think the AAP strategy is much more sustainable, of being something to someone rather than everything to everyone.
Next question, please. Kanda Batata, or I think it's something else. I'm not saying it right. Is Kanyadaan really a bad misogynistic practice? What are your thoughts on feminists denouncing the tradition in their weddings?
Why, what is Kanyadaan? Ultimately, even in a Christian wedding, the father gives away the bride. No? So what's the problem? If you don't want to do Bap giving Kanyadaan, why can't Ma do Kanyadaan? So these are really idiotic things. I don't think we should be giving the feminists any more so-called feminists. Okay, let's be clear, they're not even feminists. Because these are people who will support Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi throwing women off roofs, claiming that it's in keeping with the egalitarian practices and a feministic outlook of Islam. So these feminists are not to be taken seriously. I personally feel there's nothing misogynistic about it at all. It happens across cultures. It was a norm because men were the protectors of the family and you were going from one family to another. But remember, in India, we've also had another system. I mean, nobody wants to talk about the Khasis and Garos and their matriarchal system. Or the matriarchal system that persisted in Kerala, matrilineal. And, it's not even viewed as misandry. Misandry is fine according to them, but this isn't. So they're not even looking for gender equality that way, right? For them, women empowerment good, man empowerment bad. So they're really walking you into a trap. Don't fall for it and don't give them oxygen.
Luke Bloke wants to know, could you recommend an organic loose tea leaves brand for chai? I'm shocked to have learned how all major companies growers use harsh chemicals that are even banned in other countries.
Yeah, look, I don't drink local tea at all these days. I only get pu'er and things like that, Chinese pu'er or Sri Lankan green tea, Dilma. I'm off Tata tea, all of that. The only reason I have Tata tea bags is to make chana bhatura, because when you cook the chana, you need to put a tea bag into the chana. Other than that, I'm not going to use it.
AK wants to know, can you talk about some of the contributions by Islamic scholars in the field of math, science, and medicine? I recently heard that a Muslim scholar invented algebra or something.
No, not true. There's been a huge contribution. I mean, I can't just start knocking off names off the top of my head. What Islam did was, remember, this was a time when India was collapsing or collapsed thanks to the Turkic invasions plus caste. And the West was very, very deep into the Dark Ages. And what Islam did was it took the knowledge from everywhere, synthesized it, preserved it, and added to it. That's the general macro of all of it. Invented algebra, I don't know, but they definitely developed it very, very significantly. I think there's a lot to show you that the Babylonians and Indians had already developed algebra before that. I think True Indology, before it got banned, had done a whole thread on that. But never, see, just because you haven't invented it doesn't mean you haven't added to it very significantly. It's like saying America hasn't contributed to aviation because they didn't realistically invent flying. Apparently, a French Brazilian called Santos Dumont invented the first plane. Or you could say the Montgolfier brothers in France invented the first plane. And every wing form flying today is actually a German invention. That doesn't mean America's done more for aviation than any other country, right? So it's like that. Just because somebody invents doesn't mean that somebody else's contribution is any less.
Karan Pandita wants to know, what do you think of Sri Lankan crisis, and also who more violent and brutal between LTT and Sri Lankan army/state? Was Tamil movement justified in any sense?
Well, what do I think of the Sri Lankan crisis? What's to think about it? It's a crisis. It's something we've been warning that's been coming. Everybody could see it coming. I think even on PGurus, how often have we talked about it, Shri?
Oh, many times, many times. I
Many,
just
many
did
times.
one program 2 days ago with Major Madan. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, even on this Ask Abhijit, how often
Yes,
have we
yes.
we've
We have
discussed
talked
it
about
almost
it many times. Yeah, yeah.
almost every month, at least once a month.
Yes.
And so it's natural. There's nothing you can do about it now. But I think what China realizes is that if it doesn't bail out Sri Lanka, every other country is going to catch on to what has happened, and they're going to bail out. So China now has a vested interest in bailing Sri Lanka out. Okay. Second, who was more violent and brutal between the LTT and the Sri Lankan army? Well, the Sri Lankan army became very violent towards the end. But remember, the Sri Lankan state wasn't very nice. In a sense, whatever the LTT did, it was kind of a response to the kind of mass killings, atrocities of Tamils that were happening before that. So it was never really a just war in either from any side. I mean, this is like, was it Kissinger or Truman who said, he's a bastard, but he's my bastard?
I think it is Kissinger. Yeah.
Yeah, about somebody in South America. It's a bit like that. Neither of these were very nice. They were horrible people, both of them. And there was no, let's just say there's no balance of good in either of them. And was the Tamil movement justified? Yes, absolutely it was. But remember, the LTT killed a heck of a lot more Tamil leaders than the Sinhalas ever did. They wanted to eliminate every single person who disagreed with them. So the Tamil movement was justified. When you go around slaughtering people left, right, and center over and over again, and it is justified by the military when the army is actually helping you, joining in pogroms to kill off. I don't think people remember what happened in 82, 83, 84, where India had to carry out that evacuation from Jaffna, where several members of my own family lost everything that they had. The members of my family were killed. So, it wasn't very nice.
Gaurav Kataria wants to know, Abhijit, on Advaita's show, you went over 10 steps. Which step would Muslims in India be on? I've seen people claim they're on step 7 or step 8 due to Modi.
They're on bloody step 0. Okay? There's nothing happening. I would really urge you to watch this channel by Khalid Beg and Amna Ansari, who, are the very few Muslims. They're the actual Darahua Muslims. Who are the Darahua Muslims in this country? They are people who are terrified. They are the actual silent majority who are petrified of coming out and talking, because the moment they talk about their actual lived experiences, the so-called community leaders will come and kill them off, boycott them, banish them, whatever. Okay. So you will actually find that Muslims are in none of those stages. And I'd really urge you to start looking out. Look at Shehzad and Tehseen Poonawala. Do they actually ever feel persecuted? Look at Shazia Ilmi. Again, I would really urge you to go to Khalid Beg and Amna Ansari's YouTube channel and check it out for a modern Indian Muslim point of view. And mind you, they're not the minority. They are actually the majority. If you actually go talk to them in private, you'll understand how shit scared they are, primarily of their own community.
Mangesh Puranik wants to know, how do you see Maharashtra politics playing out? Has Fadnavis, despite being a capable leader, losing on political battle with the SSNCP? Or will Maharashtra elections being on the same year as Lok Sabha benefit him?
So I really don't understand what the second and third part of the question is, but let me just give you a macro answer. Apparently, Devendra Fadnavis's own calculation is that now that the Shiv Sena has lost so much ground by aligning with the NCP and Congress, the bipolarity is going to be BJP versus this trio, and the BJP is going to win big. Okay, now I think the biggest loser in all of this is going to be the Shiv Sena, but apparently not. The Shiv Sena, what people within the Shiv Sena are telling me is that their own estimate of their voter base is growing. Now, I don't know who is deluded in all of this, because the BJP workers on the ground are telling me, bhai, hamara bahut tez chal raha hai, and it is now a anti-BJP polarization. Shiv Sena saying, bhai, dekho, hamara voter base bad raha hai. Now, they're both, they've both got the ear to the ground. So I honestly don't know who to believe right now, unfortunately.
Diya D'Cruz wants to know, Pandits didn't get justice in Hindu majority India. The worst part is even Hindus deny the massacre or mock it. Don't you think Hindus are dumbest in the world and problem lies in the majority itself?
Yes. Like I keep saying, India gets what it deserves and Hindus get what they deserve. Exactly what they deserve. Because this is like a frog that is being boiled alive. The frog doesn't even realize that the ambient temperature is rising. If anybody tries to point out what the circumstances are, we're a good news country. We never want to hear bad news. So you take whatever analogy you want, the frog that is boiled alive, the ostrich that buries its head, whatever. I don't think there is a single stupid animal in the Jataka tales that doesn't suit as a perfect adjective for the modern day Hindu.
Reek Jyoti Hati. Is it safe to go to Germany for studies in the current situation?
Yeah, perfectly safe to go to Germany. They're not very woke. They're pretty damn good in terms of managing their own security situation. If anything, they're very upset right now. The Germans, the French, the Italians, all of them are extremely upset with what Biden went and said yesterday in Warsaw. They feel that it's a personal betrayal. And so it's just one of those things where Germany will always manage to extricate itself from a situation.
Chaitanya Naidu wants to know, since past few days, the DC swamp has sent in their hacks like Zakaria and Raghuram Rajan to pressurize India into towing their line on Russian sanctions. Do you think our politicians can withstand it?
Look, first of all, we should have never given these people any importance. You have to find out who in the Prime Minister's office went and organized that interview for him at CNN. I don't know why they persisted with keeping Raghuram Rajan on. I think you're confusing the inferiority complex that the Prime Minister's office reeks off with the, how should I put it, with the, with their ability to resist being cowered down. Just because they need validation and will accommodate certain hacks does not mean they will get cowered down. So our politicians are more than capable of withstanding it, but don't turn these two into binaries.
A couple of announcements before we go on to the next question. A couple of announcements. We are going to have a shortened session today. It's only going to be 45 minutes long, another 15 minutes left. So we will not be able to take all your questions, unfortunately, but we will record the answers to that and put it out either tomorrow or day after tomorrow at the latest. So please bear with us for that. And let's go to the next question. Thank you. Utsav wants to know, can US do regime change in Russia?
Well, theoretically, I suppose it's possible, but if you go by history, nobody's ever realistically managed to pull it off. The polls came very close, during the year of troubles. the period of troubles. They tried very hard. They didn't succeed. They thought they'd succeeded, they didn't succeed. I think even the Mongols never really did a proper regime change. Overlordship, yes, but proper regime change, no. But you're welcome to try. I in fact hope America tries to regime change, because there's only one rule of war. You never really invade Russia. I think you can take that to if you macro it, you never really try to regime change Russia.
I think what Abhijit is referring to is the two attempts by Napoleon and Germany at the height of their power to try and invade Russia with disastrous consequences, 1812 and 1940. Aditya wants to know, do you see any parallels in history which helps explain the current decline of the US or the West as a whole? What kind of observations do you notice with reference to the past historical events?
A lot. The historical events you need to look at are primarily the period of the Mahajanapadas and the period of the Greek poli, some the kind of democratic in Greece. And you'll notice the common thread amongst all of them was that they destroyed themselves first, and the Roman Republic also. Okay, they destroyed themselves because of their own infighting, and in that you might find it really strange. But the first 3-part series of Star Wars, the not very well made ones. What were those 3, Shri? Not the original 3, the Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and Star Wars. The next set of 3 that were made.
I don't remember. I don't follow Star Wars much. So sorry.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you notice, that is actually the history of democracies. Either the internal strife grows so much, the story of Amarapali, that the Lichavi Confederacy just opens its door and lets the Magadhan army in. Or the second, what happens is they distrust themselves so much that a horrible dictator rises from within. I suspect what we're seeing in America today is just that. It's exactly that. And it's no surprise then that George Soros resembles the Emperor Palpatine, then Senator Palpatine, who was behind the entire this thing. If you actually look at it, he looks a lot similar. Huh? So, and isn't it amazing? Because George Lucas is on record admitting that a lot of the storyline of Star Wars comes from his own Buddhist background. And Amarapali is an extremely important part of the Buddhist canon, of Buddhist mythology in India. So it's just one of those things. So remember, George Soros, Emperor Palpatine. Every time you see George Soros, you need to see Emperor Palpatine.
Before we go on to the next question, people like George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, they're all from the Bay Area. And so is Michelle Pfeiffer and Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks is from Oakland. I'm just doing some bragging here. A couple of other people, Loy something. Anyway, Hardik Thanki.
I'm from Bengal. Rabindranath Tagore is from Bengal. I'm from Tamil Nadu also. Rajendra Chora and Rajaraj Chora are also from there. And
Mamata Banerjee also is from Bengal.
All my cousins are also in. See what a great leader, right?
So, M.K. Stalin also is from Bengal.
Yeah. See what a great leader. And see,
Kiruma Valavan is also from Bengal. I'm sorry, Tamil Nadu.
See what. So, you see, and all my cousins are also in the Bay Area. So you can see I'm very closely linked to Tom Hanks and George Lucas and everyone. Through my cousins, of course.
Hardik Thanki wants to know, can Panchatantra be used to introduce young children to Indian philosophy and thought process?
Yes, you know why? The main thing to learn in the Panchatantra, Jataka tales, all of those things, is that you can make, it's something I've always tried, to make light to make important lessons humorous, to not make them heavy. So, I always found that before my mind always goes to the Vedas or the Gita or something like that, it almost always goes to Jataka or Panchatantra and things like that. Because, every story there had a lesson that could be interpreted in many, many different ways. And I think that's exactly what they were meant for. They were meant to be your sort of, your LKG nursery version before you went to school, to the Aranyaka and started, learning all the texts and things like that.
Malyaban Bhattacharya wants to know, do you think that India should go for F-15E of Boeing, purchase 100 of them to reduce dependence on Russia and later on reverse engineer like China did?
Well, look, I like the Boeing F-15E. It's probably much better than the Sukhoi. I think the issue here is dependence versus dependence. You're giving up one dependence for another kind of dependence. What makes you think that we're going to be able to reverse engineer the F-15 when we weren't able to reverse engineer the Sukhoi? Why do you think that? In fact, the genius of all these fourth generation fighters was under the skin. And under the skin, they are so extraordinarily complicated beasts. We can't reverse engineer them unless we have the sort of MSME ecosystem that America has. There's literally hundreds of thousands of companies which create the F-15. Boeing only makes about 22% maximum of the Boeing F-15, depending on the model. The rest is thousands upon thousands of companies. How are you going to create those thousands upon thousands of companies? If you get it here, DRDO say, yes, sir, we will do it, sir, and then they will employ thousands and thousands of idiots who will never create a valuable product because it will all get bogged down in bureaucracy.
When you come to Bay Area, remind me, Abhijit, I'll drive you past some of the Air Force and Army installations that we used to operate out of Bay Area. And those have shut down, but the ecosystem that was developing parts for them is still thriving. I mean, a lot of the stuff that the US Army, Air Force, Navy uses is built still inside the United States. There are still fabs that only produce for the US Armed Services. So there's a lot interesting stuff that I can show you to.
Because the military doesn't have to be located there for the industry to be located there.
Right. No, but things, initially,
the real game changers. No. Look, the Second World War industrial analogies don't even apply anymore. Since the information revolution has happened, the digital revolution and then the information revolution, the nature of the industry has changed. Before the information revolution, Boeing would have manufactured 70 to 80% of its aircraft and would have had a supplier trail chain of a few hundred companies. Today, the Boeing would manufacture no more than 15 to 22% maximum, and the trail chain would be hundreds of thousands, literally. Because you're looking, when you say 1,000 direct suppliers, you're not even looking at the further or all the micro suppliers to those suppliers, because they're not fabricating what they do out of thin air. And the huge kill ratios that the F-15 is able to achieve. Why? It's because each one of those components brings about a small evolutionary change. Like, they say a big victory is the sum total of lots of small victories. It's like that. A big technology revolution is the sum total of lots of tiny little technology evolutions.
Bhujanga wants to know which is more of a threat to security external, like China, or internal like jihadis?
Boss, these are, don't ask me these one versus the other question. It's like saying, is it worse getting nuked by Pakistan or worse getting nuked by China? Ultimately, you're dying of a nuke, no? So they're completely different threats. It's like asking me, sir, is cancer more dangerous to you, or is a cerebral palsy more dangerous to you? You're going to die of both. And you never know when you're going to get either of them, right?
Krishna Raj wants to know, what is CRT, critical race theory? Is the first principle wrong in itself or just second order effects giving it a bad name?
Okay, no. It is rotten through and through, because what it is, this is basically communist doctrine where class warfare has been replaced by race warfare. It's that simple. It's really that simple. Where you take the most vulnerable sections of society, make them violent, and make them believe that their misery is because of oppression, and you give it all scientific mumbo jumbo around it. It is pure, undiluted crap. And there is a reason why facts are considered racist. Because they don't want you to learn facts.
Himanshu wants to know, with such sound philosophy, does Sanatana Dharma have anything similar counter to jihad? Was it intentionally kept this way? Are there any examples of Abrahamic religions receding that we can study?
Look, Sanatana Dharma may have a very sound philosophy, but tell me who understands or propagates it today. Tell me any of the big guru names that you know today. What exactly are they alluring you with? Is it that great intellectual tradition that they're propagating? No, they're propagating very in-your-face, chota-mota things, which, because you have a prior attachment to it, think it's, oh, but it's so profound, sir. The true profundity of Hinduism lies somewhere else. I've not heard of most gurus even talk about it. No, mostly. None of the current living ones at any rate. Okay, now, can we go back to the previous question, please?
Yeah. We're still on the previous question. Sorry about that.
Right. Are there any examples of Abrahamic religions receding? Well, no, not really. Everybody makes a big hoo-ha about Indonesia. Trust me, it's not receding out there at all. The only thing that is replacing Abrahamic religions is in industrial countries where people are becoming more irreligious. But they're definitely not turning towards Hinduism. Hinduism is not talking to them. Okay, because they're at a level where they see the stupidity of the Abrahamic faiths. But then they look at the caliber of Hinduism that is being preached in India. A Hinduism that is preached to a population with 1/100th of their, not 1/100th, but 1/20th of their disposable income. Do you honestly think it's going to appeal to somebody? What appeals to a person with $2,000 per annum is going to appeal to somebody with a per capita income of $43,000 per annum, really? Right? So when you go to Antilla and meet Mukesh Ambani, if you go tell him, भाई साहब आप मेरे लिए वोट कर दीजिए, मैं आपको रोटी कपड़ा मकान दूंगा, he's going to get his guards to beat you up and throw you off the 44th floor of Antilla. At the same time, if you go to the Dharavi slum, which is a few kilometers outside his Antilla, and you go tell them, देखिए मैं आपको रोटी कपड़ा मकान दूंगा, he's going to be, हाँ बहुत अच्छा बहुत अच्छा बहुत अच्छा. So there's a complete dumbing down, stupidization of Hindu philosophy that has happened, which is not attractive to the West. You love looking at individuals propagating the Vedas or talking about yoga and things like that, but nowhere is it a movement. Not happening.
Last question for today. Tanveer Toor wants to know, what will it take for the Modi regime to wake up to Islamic Jihad? How many more Hindus must die before Modi does something substantial?
Look, Modi is a man who's bogged down in the micro. He can't see the macro. Okay? So he lives from election to election, and unfortunately, elections here happen every 6 months. So there's nobody actually looking at the macro picture. So there's nothing to actually wake him up. Best of luck to you. I think a lot of people have tried. They've all failed spectacularly. The real solution to it is heavy industrialization. one step. I'm not saying it's the only solution. In fact, the initial stages of that industrialization will actually get worse. But do you see any step in that direction? No. So it's all just yak yak.
All right, that's all for today, and we'll pick up all your unanswered questions and give you a separate video. Thank you so much, Abhijit, and take care. Namaskar.